everybody, welcome to the video. It's Friday, June 18th, and we're breaking down this monster 15-game slate that we have over on DraftKings today. We have each and every single team playing, and it's a monster slate. It is absolutely loaded. We have tons of good pitching options. We have lots of good bats to talk about, so it should be a fun one. I'm excited for it. I'm sure you guys are as well. And if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me over on social media if you want, using the handles in the bottom right corner of your screen. And if you want to help support the channel over on Patreon, link is down below for that. If you do want to join the community, there's a few hundred people over there, and got projections, optimizer, ownership projections, rankings, cheat sheets, data sheets, Discord community, access into the entire spreadsheet, all that fun stuff. Link is down in the description below. But I think that's it for the plug. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as per usual, we'll start with the pitchers, then move on to the bats. And we'll start up top with our ace of the slate, Corbin Burnes, $10,200. I know it didn't work out for Brandon Woodruff yesterday. He gave up that grand slam to CJ Cron early on, so kind of had his fighting claws way back to positive points. I think he ended up with around 7, but that's not what you wanted out of a guy that was around $10,000. And Corbin Burnes is in a very similar spot here. I'd say Corbin Burnes is better than Brandon Woodruff overall this year, but both guys have been fantastic. But again, you guys know the risk of rostering pitchers in Coors Field. I said I liked Woodruff in tournaments yesterday. I just didn't really want to trust it for cash games, but I mean, it's a good matchup, but again, Coors Field can neutralize the best of pitchers. I think Jacob deGrom is probably the only one you wouldn't want to worry about. Didn't he have like 14 some strikeouts versus them earlier in the season? But it's definitely been heating up in Denver, which is going to help offenses as well. And they still have a nice 4.5 implied team total, which if this game was in Milwaukee outside of Coors Field, we're probably talking of upper 2s here for the team total for the Rockies. So they're definitely getting a nice boost there. But Corbin Burnes should be fine. If he doesn't give up a grand slam like Brandon Woodruff, I think we'll be okay. Even if he gives up a couple of runs, the strikeout should be there for Corbin Burnes. I know Coors Field hurts strikeouts a little bit, but he is a heavy favorite. And looking at his numbers so far this season, he's actually getting a bit unlucky. As crazy as that sounds, with a nice 2.27 ERA, his xFIP's in the 1s, so is his Sierra. 41.5% K rate, not really walking too many guys. 14.5 Ks per 9, not giving up any power whatsoever. Less than a 100 ISO this season with only a 21% hard contact rate and 0.3 homers per 9. So the guy's been absolutely elite. Great versus righties and great versus lefties as well. And I mean, the only downside here is it's Coors Field. Like, the Rockies lineup is not very good, but again, being in Colorado definitely helps offenses no matter what. So you got to be a little bit careful here. I wouldn't say Corbin Burnes is a lock by any means because he is pretty expensive, and there's definitely a load, like a ton of good offensive pieces that are very expensive today. So I don't think you absolutely have to play Corbin Burnes, but he's definitely an option on this slate. Dropping out of Robbie Ray, $9,300. I wish it was $8,300, but $9,300. Pitching in Camden Yards, which is never the most fun thing in the world to do. I know Toronto hasn't exactly been pitching in the most pitcher-friendly parks so far this season. It really hasn't mattered for Robbie Ray, but there is some concerns there pitching in Baltimore, and it's definitely hotter this time of the season, so that never helps things. But Ray has been awesome this year. I'm not sure if it's the tight pants or whatever it is, but the guy has been flawless. In the past, Robbie Ray was a guy that was very shaky. You never knew what you're going to get. Pretty boom bust for the most part. He's probably going to walk a ton of guys with strikeouts. So far this season, he hasn't really been shaky. He's been very steady. The strikeouts are there, even more so than normal. And he's not walking any guys, which is the main issue we've had with Robbie Ray in the past. Like, I know he's got a 6% walk rate, but for the most part, the walks really aren't that bad compared to what we've seen in the past. Like, I remember sometimes there'd be like 8 walks from Robbie Ray. The strikeouts would be there, but it's an absolute headache rostering him. But that's not really the case these days. A really nice 3 xFIP, 32% K rate. He is giving up some power, which is one issue. 200 ISO given up this year with a 35% hard contact rate and over 2 homers per 9. But the Orioles lineup, outside of a few guys, aren't that great. The main weapon here has been Cedric Mullins so far this season. Obviously, Trey Mancini righty could give him some issues, but Cedric Mullins should be nullified a little bit since the lefty-on-lefty matchup. But I like Robbie Ray a lot. I like the Blue Jays offense quite a bit. Would be very surprised if he can't pick up a win. There's no implied team total out yet for either teams here. Since it's Camden Yards, I have to say the Blue Jays would probably be around 5.5. I don't think they'll get quite up to 6. And our Bruce Zimmerman's a lefty, so some of these guys are going to grade out pretty well. But Teoscar Hernandez, he's not going to be in the lineup, and Bruce Zimmerman has had some decent games so far this year, so don't think we'll see quite 6. But wouldn't surprise me for north of 5, close to 5.5. And if I had to guess the Orioles, since we're in Camden Yards, maybe low 4s. Could see it low 4s, maybe upper 3s. We'll see. Just, I don't know. Maybe be mid-30s. But either way, Robbie Ray should have a good game. I think the strikeouts are going to be there. Looking at the Orioles splits this season versus left-handed pitching, they're not striking out a ton, 21% K rate, not really walking a lot, but they've had some decent power and nice WRC plus. But the way Robbie Ray's been pitching this season, I will side with him, but there's definitely a little bit of risk there because we are in Camden Yards, and the Orioles actually have not been bad so far this season versus lefties. Alex Cobb, $8,800. We finally had a pitcher work versus Detroit for the first time in a week, it's felt like. Shohei Ohtani ended up with 21 fantasy points. Not a killer day, but you definitely wouldn't complain at $8,100 for 21 points. And I know Cobb's the guy that I haven't really rostered much this year. It's a smaller sample size. Only has 43 innings pitched this year and hasn't really, on average, going super deep in the game, 81 pitches per game. But I know the ERA is close to 5, but that xFIP's at 2.5 for the pretty close to it, 2.5, 2.6. And the Sierra's at really low 3 with a nice 28% K rate. 7.5% walk rate is nothing to get too excited about, but giving up less than a 100 ISO, 60% ground ball rate, only a 29% hard contact rate, and less than a half a homer per 9. So the underlying numbers are a lot better than the surface numbers with that ERA close to 5. So I'm hoping that keeps some people off of him, but I'm liking the other numbers that I'm seeing from him, and obviously we can always play righties versus Detroit. We can play lefties. I mean, they've been terrible versus both so far this season. Worse versus lefties. They've actually had a decent amount of pop versus right-handed pitching this season, but like I said, Alex Cobb hasn't really been giving up much power this year, and they have a 27% K rate, so liking Alex Cobb quite a bit. Don't let that 5 ERA scare you. And a couple of other options here that are a little bit cheaper. There wasn't any super cheap pitchers I liked in this slate, and sometimes there's some cheap pitchers, but when I'm just not comfortable with the cheap pitcher, I just won't have them listed because I don't want to list them just for the sake of having a cheap pitcher because I don't know, they just scare the heck out of me. So I like Yusei Kikuchi here, $8,600. Probably only a tournament option for me because the Rays do have some pretty good bats in that lineup. Austin Meadows, Randy Arozarena, Brandon Lau, and some other guys. So it's always a bit risky rostering guys against the Rays, but they do strike out quite a bit. The power does come with some strikeouts, and Yusei Kikuchi is a pitcher that can get some strikeouts, and he's been pretty good this year. Pretty nice 3.5 ERA, 3.4 xFIP, 3.71 Sierra, 25.7% K rate. I know these numbers do show up red, but we're comparing them to a lot of really good pitchers, so that's the only reason why. If this was a larger pool of pitchers, like on the main sheet, these numbers are not going to show up bright red, I can promise you that. 165 ISO given up this season, only 27.5% hard contact rate, is giving up over 1.5 homers per 9, so I don't know, maybe you got to worry about a guy like Randy Arozarena, but I think for the most part, Yusei Kikuchi should be a fine option here. The Rays so far this season versus lefties are striking out over a 28% clip, so that's the upside we are chasing here with Kikuchi. And Jose Barrios, $8,500. I could see him being a very popular SP2 on this slate. Gets a nice soft matchup versus Texas. Is a very heavy favorite. Folty's on the mound for the Rangers, so I think the Minnesota Twins make for a decent stack tonight. Now my favorite stack is, as you're going to see, there's lots of good offenses today, but I do think they are viable. They're just kind of expensive and not exactly the best spot today, but only a 4 implied team total against them. Barrios has a 26% K rate this season, respectable 3.4 xFIP, 3.62 Sierra, power close to 200 this season given up, which I don't love, but only 1.2 homers per 9. I think he should be fine in this matchup versus the Rangers. They've been way worse versus lefties this year, but versus righties still striking out over a 26% clip, well below 300 and a 147 ISO, so nothing to really be too scared about. And with that being said, I think we can move on to the bats. Not a whole lot to love at pitching day, but there's definitely some pretty decent options overall. But we'll start with the catcher position, and we'll talk about Omar Narvaez here. $4,600 lefty on righty matchup here versus Antonio Senzatella. Took a while for the Brewers to get going last night. I think they ended up with, I think last time I saw they were with 3 or 4 runs. I think Narvaez had 8 points, so they didn't really knock their socks off or anything. But they get a better matchup here tonight here, because Marquez is a respectable pitcher. I said I liked him in tournaments. Don't think I'd go there in cash games, but I think he scored 15 or 16 points, which was not bad at 50. Was he $5,500? It seemed way too cheap. But Senzatella is definitely a worse pitcher. Their team total is half a run higher than it was yesterday at just north of 6, and would not be surprised if that rises throughout the day. And if you're going to use anybody for Senzatella, I do prefer the lefties, but you can use pretty much anybody here. But Narvaez has been good this season, hitting in the middle of the order, batting close to 320 with some decent pop. I think he makes sense in all formats if you got the money for him. Will Smith, $4,300, going up against Caleb Smith. Not the worst pitcher out there, but yeah, Arizona's a decent place to hit. If I had to guess the Dodgers team total, there's nothing out yet, but it's probably going to be north of 5. I'm not sure if it's going to hit 5.5, but maybe like a 5.2, 5.3. I could see that ended up being out there. But anyway, Will Smith, one of the better hitting catchers in baseball, close to a 200 ISO this season. I do like the power upside. Then Max Stassi, $4,000, going up against Jose Urena. Loving the Angels tonight. They have a team total of 5.5, which is one of the highest of the teams that we do have that have Vegas run totals out yet. So would definitely be interested in all these Angels here. Prefer the lefties, but you can certainly play righties too. And Stassi's been good this season. 319 batting average, 419 WOBA, 275 ISO, 171 WRC plus, and a 594 slugging with some really, really good numbers overall. Kind of surprisingly good numbers here from Max Stassi. And looking at the splits here for Jose Urena, not very good. 61 inning sample size. He got rocked last time out versus the Chicago White Sox. I don't remember how long he lasted in that game, but I don't think it was more than a couple innings. I believe he ended up giving up 7 runs, but only a 13% K rate this year. 10% walk rate. Isn't giving up a ton of power, 137 ISO, but a 36% hard contact rate. And typically you like lefties versus him. You can still play righties, but versus lefties, only a 7% K rate, over a 300 batting average given up, 33% hard contact rate, and the ISO still is pretty low. He hasn't really giving up homers this year, but I think if we give that some time, we'll definitely see the homers show up here. And the Angels are in a great spot tonight. They're not overly expensive, although a couple of these guys are expensive, like Ohtani and Walsh, but the other guys are definitely stackable. Freddie Freeman dropping out of first base, $5,600. First base is a loaded position today. We have Ohtani, who I threw in the outfield here just so we didn't have 3 guys that are nearly $6,000. We have Vlad. I did not list Vlad just because I wouldn't say the Blue Jays are my overall favorite stack. I'd say like the Braves a little bit more, and I would say the Angels. But you can certainly play Vlad. He's very expensive, but I mean, it's for good reason. He's been one of the best players, if not the best player in baseball this season, hitting-wise. So you really can't go wrong with him versus a lefty. But I didn't list him here just because of the price point, but he's certainly viable. But Freddie Freeman here, $5,600, like all the Braves quite a bit. One of the best stacks, if not the best stack on the slate. And it's a very easy team to stack. Maybe not price-wise, but you got your guys in the outfield. You got your guys at third base, shortstop. That's just one of the easier positions to stack. Because some teams kind of have like where they don't even have like a second baseman or something, or you know what I mean. Like some teams are just kind of hard to stack because there's just so many guys at the same position or whatever. You guys get the idea. But Freddie Freeman has been killing righties for his career now. So I mean, I don't really think I have to explain this. Carlos Martinez is not a very good pitcher. I remember last time he pitched, it did not end well for him. And on the season, he's got a 5.5 ERA, xFIP and SIERA close to 5, only 15% K rate. 1.3 whip. I mean, he's just not been great this year. Isn't giving up a ton of power, but I still think you can definitely stack against Carlos Martinez, which is something I plan on doing tonight. Jared Walsh, very expensive, like very, very expensive. I think this might be the most expensive he's been this year, but $5,500. Love lefties versus Urena, and Jared Walsh is kind of crushing it this year. Overall, batting close to 300 with a 265 ISO. You look at those numbers specifically to righties, batting over 300 and like around 300 something ISO. So definitely like Jared Walsh here. He's just super, super expensive. Then Paul Goldschmidt, $3,700. I'm not in love with the Cardinals on this slate, but I wanted to list him here because I think he might end up being a popular cash option just because he's decently cheap and he's facing a lefty. Max Fried, not a bad lefty or anything, but if I'm going to use anybody, I'm going to prefer righties versus him. And Paul Goldschmidt, we know he's great versus left-handed pitching. And I keep clicking on the pitcher data sheet. If you keep seeing that pop up, it's an accident. But looking at Goldie splits this season versus lefties, it's not pretty. 0.65 ISO, and it's just not really been good this year. But I still like him at $3,700 versus a lefty. I mean, his overall career numbers are definitely really good versus them. But you can throw guys like Vlad, Ohtani, and whatnot in here. I would have no problem with that if you want to spend up at first base today. Going down to second base, we have Marcus Semien, $5,000, also eligible at shortstop. I do like all the Blue Jays here. I'm guessing their team total is going to be around 5.5. It's a hitter-friendly park in Camden Yards. It's summer, so things are heating up. Definitely makes it easier to hit. And you get the guaranteed nothing at bats on the road. And Bruce Zimmerman, while he hasn't been terrible this year, I still think we can pick on him a little bit. Looking at his overall splits, again, it's not terrible. ERA close to 5, but the xFIP's at 4.2, SIERA at 4.4. 20% K rate. Is giving up some power though, close to a 200 ISO given up, and Marcus Semien's definitely been really good so far this season. I believe he's batting 290, 378 WOBA, 237 ISO. Does strike out quite a bit, but definitely the upside is there, and he's not overly expensive at $5,000. Ozzie Albies, $4,600. He ended up having a triple yesterday. Forget if you drove in a run with that, but he ended up having a triple. I think he ended with 12 or 14 points, so pretty good day for Ozzie. The price is creeping up there, but I think you can pretty much play all the, almost said the Boston Red Sox today, all the Atlanta Braves today. Let's get my B's mixed up. And Luis Urias, $4,400. Again, just stacking against Antonio Sensatella. I prefer the lefties versus him, but if he's going to be leading off like he has been, he had a decent game last night, got on base a few times. Don't mind him at that price point if you're just stacking up the Milwaukee Brewers. Going to third base, Rafael Devers, $5,700 going against Jackson Kowar. something like that. But he has been bad in his first 2 starts. He was like was supposed to be a good pitching prospect, and obviously in time I think he'll definitely be decent. But he does not seem ready. He's had 2 starts this year, and I don't think he's made it out of the second inning. I had to double check that, but he is not. I mean, he's been bad so far, and I'm not sure that's really going to change here versus Boston. Guys like Devers, Verdugo, Gino Martinez. I mean, you can play the entire offense. They're just a little bit expensive, but I do like Devers versus right-handed pitching, and he's very pricey, but it makes some sense if you got the money for him. Looking at his splits, specifically versus righties this year, he's got a massive 339 ISO, 626 slugging, 400 WOBA, and close to a 300 batting average. So definitely have some interest here in Rafael Devers. Anthony Rendon, $4,500. He's supposed to be back today. I know the numbers are terrible so far this season, but he's at a fair price point, hitting a good spot in the order. And I love all the Angels here versus Jose Urena. Then Austin Riley here with his fly ball tendency. If you're just stacking up the Braves, I don't mind it. Righties or lefties here versus Carlos Martinez. I mean, you can pretty much use everybody here. Looking at if you think they can get the Carlos Martinez early and knock him out of the game, and you're worried about the bullpen for the Cardinals, so far this year, they have one of the worst overall team xFIPs bullpen-wise. It's at nearly 5, 4.93. And if you thought the Rockies bullpen was bad, they're about 0.2 higher than that. So if they can get to Martinez early on, it should get even better here versus no matter who comes out of the Cardinals bullpen. So definitely liking all the Braves here. That's definitely a plus for them. Dropping down to shortstop, Bo Bichette, $5,800, very expensive, but I pretty much like all the Blue Jays. They're very expensive though, so it's not that easy to stack them up. But if you're going cheap with pitcher, I think it's viable. If you just want to take a couple of these guys, you can make that work too. Willie Adames. Someone told me how to pronounce his name, but I forgot to study it too much. But close enough. $4,400. Again, just stacking all the Brewers here in Coors Field. It's pretty much as simple as that. Even though his numbers have been terrible this year, we know he's got some decent pop, and he's been stuck in the trop for the most part of the season. Then Dansby Swanson, $3,700, just cheaper Braves exposure. He has a terrible batting average this season, terrible WRC plus, terrible WOBA, but it does have an ISO above 200. Dropping down to the outfield, we have a very, very pricey Ronald Acuna Jr., $6,300, but one of the best players in baseball. Over a 300 ISO this season, over a 600 slugging, 1,000 OPS, 314 ISO, 421 WOBA, batting close to 300, and you have stolen base upside too. So love Acuna if you got the money for him, but good luck trying to fit him in if you are spending for pitcher today. Christian Yelich, $6,100. He's been pretty bad this year. Pretty much zero power with a 136 ISO, low batting average, striking out quite a bit. Still walks a lot, over a 400 on base percentage this season, close to a 20% walk rate. But I don't know. I just hate spending up for Yelich these days because it just feels like he sucks. I mean, it feels like you're wasting $6,000. But for the lefty versus Sensatella, he is in Coors Field. If there's any time to play Yelich, it's right now. Shohei Ohtani, $5,100, going up against Jose Urena. Like, if I had to pick between Yelich and Ohtani, I'll probably end up siding with Ohtani here. You can save $300. I know the Angels team total is not quite 6, but the way Ohtani's been playing this season, he's been like twice the guy Yelich has been. He's got like double the ISO, if not more. 347 ISO this year, 618 slugging, over a 400 WOBA. You love lefties versus Urena. They absolutely smash him. So if Ohtani doesn't homer versus Urena, I mean, I would be very shocked. Like, I would say he's pretty much the top home run call in the entire slate versus righty specifically this season. Like, even on the same handedness matchup here, Ohtani's got over a 400 ISO versus lefties, but still 313 versus righties. I mean, he's just been absolutely killing it this year. Strikes out quite a bit, but love the home run upside from Ohtani. Just wish he wasn't that expensive. Obviously, Al Garcia, $4,600. Righty-righty matchup here, but he's had decent power this season versus lefties or righties. Alex Verdugo, $4,300, go against Jackson, who has been just pretty brutal so far to start the season. I mean, I'm sure he'll get better at some point, but he just does not seem ready. And Verdugo is just a nice, solid hitter. He doesn't have a ton of power, but 176 ISO isn't terrible for a guy that's usually fairly priced. It's in a good spot in the order and bats close to 300. Justin Upton, $4,100. He's shown some decent power this year. Terrible batting average, but 242 ISO and should be leading off for the Angels, which is one of my favorite stacks on the slate. Randall Grichuk, $3,800, should be in the cleanup spot, a righty on lefty matchup versus Bruce Zimmerman, who has not been terrible this year, but it's Camden Yards, and I like the Blue Jays offense. It's definitely a bit intimidating. Obviously, Teoscar Hernandez can hurt things a little bit, but I don't think Bruce Zimmerman's going to have a ceiling game by any means. I think you can certainly stack up the Blue Jays, and he's a little bit more affordable than the other guys like Marcus Semien, Bo Bichette, Vlad, so if you just want cheaper exposure to them, I don't hate Grichuk there. And then Abraham Almonte, $2,400. He'll probably end up being like super popular just because of that price point. He was yesterday. made sense. I think he had around 12 points in that game. I think he had an RBI double, if I remember correctly. But either way, he did fine for his price point. He is still dirt cheap. I'm sure DraftKings will catch on to this at some point, but I would just continue to play Almonte at this price point. Like, he hasn't been bad. He's batting close to 300. It's only 50 plate appearances, but batting close to 300 with over a 420 WOBA, 243 ISO, 172 WRC plus, 24% walk rate, not really striking out much. Switch hitter, so he usually always has the advantage. So, yeah, I love Almonte. I mean, just point per dollar wise, I'd say he's my favorite play on the slate because I like the Brave stack and he makes things fit. So, absolutely love Almonte. If you're playing cash games, just plug him in as long as he's in the lineup. I don't see why he wouldn't be, but love him in all formats. But with that being said, guys, that'll be it for the video. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, turn on the notification bell as well so you don't miss out whenever videos are posted. Try to keep these posted around 9 a.m. on most days. And since it's Friday, I'll have my NASCAR video out later today if you do want to check that out. I'll also be going live this weekend for NASCAR as well. So feel free to do that. Follow me over on social media. Sign up on Patreon if you want access to extra content. But that'll be it, guys. Hope this video was helpful. Enjoy the start to your weekend. Hope the weather is wonderful wherever you are. And I'll see you guys in the next video.